Hello, this is an advanced track. A few words about myself. I'm a self-employed consultant and I do implement application security programs from the strategy of planning to real hands-on and getting it running. And I would like to share my experiences with this. I obviously use the DevSecOps maturity model to communicate my plan to the developers and operations people. All right, let's start with a problem statement for maturity models in general. So you know what the DevSecOps maturity model is there or why it is there. So the problem is that in an organization, and when you're in an organization and you want to enhance the security, the question is, how do you do that? So I see two options for that. One is in DevOps strategies and another one is through DevOps strategies. So in DevOps strategies means that you need to harden for example, the build pipeline and the deployment process, your production environment and so on. And through DevSecOps, through DevOps strategies, I mean that the nice DevOps world gives us a lot of opportunities. So for example, we now have a build and deployment pipeline and we can put tests in there and stop things from going in production. That wasn't so easy 10 years ago, but nowadays I would say it's a standard. And when you have an overview of what you want to do, the question is, how do you prioritize this? So you have maybe 20 things in mind. What do you do first? And that is where the maturity model chips in, which gives you a structure of what to do first and what to do later. The solution is obviously an application security program, from my point of view, based on a maturity model for your team. So I always say in your area of influence. So in case you're a developer in a team, you will not change the organization. Your area of influence will be your team, so you can assess your team's maturity and enhance that. While when you're an enterprise security architect, you can change the whole organization. What I have learned in the last years is that as a product team, I want fast feedback for performed security activities. And also I want feedback when they are gone missing. An example is, for example, security trainings. When you didn't do it in the past and then you start participating in security trainings, then you want that this shows as a green flag that you have it implemented. And also when you prioritize other things and don't go often to security trainings, that you see, hey, we are not reaching our target and we should attend more security trainings again. So after this small introduction, here is the agenda for the next couple of minutes. We start with a solid foundation. So what do you need to have already in order to plan or assess your applications? Then we come to how to analyze security practices very quickly. How to plan security activities, how to implement and measure improvements, and in the end we come to a small summary. So we start with a solid foundation. What you need to know is your applications in production. If you don't know that, I can't help you. There are ways to do it, to figure out some applications, but they are all crappy. I will not show them today because we are not having so much time, but you need to know production applications from my point of view. So I'm a security architect, and from my point of view, an information security officer needs to have kind of a list of production applications which I can hook on. If that is not there, I, as a security person, cannot help you so much. What we also need is not only the production applications, we need to know where this application is running, what is the team responsible for, what is the person of contact. In the best case, you have a risk owner. Then maybe you want to know protection requirements or regulatory requirements. And also, what you should know is what security toolings do you have already, which teams could use. That doesn't mean they have to use it, but teams could use this tooling. that is the foundation. You see here an inventory overview in maturity levels. So this is basically a maturity model, or that is the DevSecOps maturity model, is a snapshot of it. You have the dimension, the subdimension. So dimension is build and deployment. The subdimension is deployment. And then you have, in this case, I just show you 3 levels. DSOMM has 5 levels. And these are the levels for the inventory of how we can enhance the inventory. So on level 1, I just want a list. Maybe the CISO has a list in Excel often of production components. So I don't need to know the protection requirement for this application. I just need to know these are the applications which we have, and this is a point of contact. Then on level 2, I would like to have more information. I would like to have kind of an automated inventory of production artifacts. So that could be a microservice. So nowadays, often an application consists of multiple artifacts, of multiple container images. I would like to know all the different services in production, the ones we develop by ourselves, and the open source or other third-party components. And then in the end, we see on level 3, I recommend an inventory of production dependencies. So we not only know what services are deployed, for example, in a namespace in Kubernetes, we know in addition which dependencies are used in the services. Yeah, and you see that is how you can get better, and that is a maturity model helping us to understand what to do first and what later. Now we come to analyze security practices. So why do you need to analyze where you are right now? Because only then you can say where you want to be and get budgets for your security initiatives. How do you analyze? There are multiple ways. You can do an interview-based style, which is helping a lot. So you might invite 2 people from a team and conduct an interview that gives you high quality feedback. You could conduct interview workshops. So you gather, from my point of view, 10 people in a room and give them a prepared maturity model and ask them to fill it out. Not the whole DSOMM, that will be too much. You prepared one with much less questions and ask them to fill it out. They need to have some previous security knowledge, otherwise they will ask too much. So they need to know what is static application security testing or what are the tools for this, otherwise it will fail. But if you do have already security champions and they are trained a bit, then this interview workshop is, from my point of view, the way to go. And if you can't do the 2 previous styles, you will end up with a questionnaire. There, the quality will often be bad because people fill it out like they feel, or they want to hide things in case they're evil. Yeah. And how often do you want to do that? Maybe yearly, maybe bi-yearly. I will show later that this is for me just the initial or very deep going analysis. I will recommend later some other ways also. What are ways? There is, or at least that are the ones I know, building security in maturity model, then OWASP assurance maturity model, and the OWASP DevSecOps maturity model. And I will focus on the both OWASP one because we are here at an OWASP conference, and that are also my favorites. Apart from frameworks, you will need to know, you might want to ask for an organization chart diagram, where you also get to know how many developers do you have, how many security people do you have, how many operations people do you have, because maybe you have dreams about what you can do as a security team, but when there are too many developers for a security team, you might end up saying, okay, we need to use a questionnaire, for example. And the relation between them, so who is responsible for what, how do they interact, and also interesting, especially to do it on the organization chart, is which departments are using which technologies. Do you get an overview? You need to know security tooling, stack, which is there already. That doesn't mean that everyone is using it, and the processes around policies and standards. And maybe you want to see also pen test reports and open finding in order to plan what you need. All right. Then I already introduced SOMM and DSOMM. From my point of view, they are used for different things from my point of view. So SOMM is a standard to perform an assessment, and it gives you a high-level overview. It's written from security people for security people. That's very important. From security people for security people. So a developer, I wouldn't throw a SOMM assessment at a developer. But it's very cool to give the outcome to a manager because it's very, very structured. And you can talk with the management about it. Where are we right now? We need budget to enhance these and these areas. Yes, on a high-level overview. Then we have the DevSecOps maturity model, which is close before implementation. It's an emerging project, I would say. It's used already around the world, but I feel not as much as SOMM. It is written for developers and operations, so that is a big difference from my point of view. So you can use SOMM to talk about the budget, but then when it comes into implementing things, planning activities, then I use DSOMM in order to communicate where are we right now and where do we want to go. Yeah, often. So far 4 times, customers came to me and said, hey, Timo, we have a SOMM assessment here. What should we do, right? And then DSOMM comes into place. Here are example outcomes of an analysis. So on the left, you see SOMM, and on the right, you see DSOMM. You see it's already, the structure is completely different. While in SOMM, you just count what you have implemented. It could, in DSOMM, it's a bit different. It's a heat map, and there you can see, for example, that here is something missing, right? So, and here is something missing, and that is important to tackle first before you go on level 2 or 3. That you cannot see so easily in SOMM. Yeah, what else to consider when you perform an assessment? I like to use includes or inheritance, depending on how you want to use it. So that in a larger organization, I use, for example, 1 version control system often, or maximum 2. Or I have maybe 3 different environments for production applications can be deployed to. So I first try to identify these different teams and perform an assessment with them. Then I can later build up upon this. Because then I just need to ask an assessment with an application team. Hey, do you use GitHub? And then they say, yes, we use GitHub. And then I can already include all the different policies which we have in GitHub. That doesn't mean that everything is secure. So one question, for example, which I always ask teams is how they handle secrets, because even though there might be processes and good policies, they might do it different. Yeah, but it saves you a lot of time in the assessment. I personally mostly get 2 hours for an assessment for a team. Then I get 2 people in there, and I cannot ask for an assessment after a quarter again. I can ask for an assessment after a year. So I need to try to save time during the assessment. Yeah. Then we come to plan of security activities. Yeah, initially, after I did my master's thesis, I had to plan a vulnerability management program, and I planned it for the next 3 years. I had to learn that you can't plan for the next 3 years. You can be happy when you can plan the next 2 activities. Because 1 activity takes half a year, and you don't know how it ends up. So yeah, so that's why I have question marks there. So maybe you can plan a year if you're good, and you know your capacities, and you have a good feeling of how long it takes to implement, but mostly it takes much longer than you think. So, but very important is to have the current overview, how is the current security posture, and then you plan the next 2 activities, and that's good. And as more activities you have, as more work you have. So you cannot add a lot. In the start, you can add a lot of activities, but then you need to maintain them. And teams need to maintain them. So for example, when you start security champions and you want to meet every 2 weeks, for example, with the security champions, then this is a workload for you already, which you have. So you cannot add endless things to your security team. That also doesn't scale. So as more you have, as slower it will become. Yeah, how to plan your roadmap to achieve a good maturity. I see 2 ways, or maturity models and scorecards. Both have advantages and different disadvantages. I focus on maturity model because DSOMM is a maturity model. Here we saw already the structure. You have dimensions, ABC, different levels to get better. I combine this with protection requirements. So as higher the protection requirement, as higher the level should be. Yeah. You know, there's a difference between it should and it is. So even if the protection requirement is on level 3, it might be that the team is currently still on level 1. So you need to do some transformation activities to explain why they need to get better. When you create new activities, you should take account the dimension. Very important is to not have redundancy. So you shouldn't have the same activity 2 times in different dimensions. Then obviously the level. When you define the level, you should take into account the dependencies to other activities. So an example is a vulnerability management system. Do you need one or not? That depends on how many security scans you want to integrate. So for example, if you say, hey, I just need software composition analysis, you might use dependency track, and that's okay. And there you have suppressions also when you don't want to get notified again about vulnerability. But in case you know already that in your vision, let's call it vision. In your vision, you have multiple scanners, SaaS scanner, DAS scanners, infrastructure scanners. Then it might make sense to directly use a vulnerability management system. So dependencies to other activities are very important. Sometimes you can't do an activity before another activity is done. Then, as I said, existing tools and processes. The outcome for security is very important. So what's the benefit of doing it? And the ease of implementation. So is it a quick win or is it hard to reach? Yeah, then we have the roadmap definition. So who defines the roadmap? You as a security architect or the product team? My experience is that it should be the security team because the product team, Star, can you bring me some water, please? Because the product team, it doesn't know all the different activities. So, and you need to explain all the different activities to the team. And not only one team, because depending on the number of teams you have, multiple times. Thanks a lot. Now it's much better. Yeah, so that's my experience. I wouldn't let teams choose what they want to implement, but there might be exceptions which you need to take into account. So every team says, we are different. We are completely different than everyone else. Yeah, and then you need to talk with them. Why are they different? Here are 3 examples on which I experienced. We cannot open pull requests. We use SVN is one. Then another one is we're stuck with a 32-bit application and cannot patch. So in this case, in case they patch to 64-bit applications, the numbers are changing, and for the business, it's very important that the numbers are the same. In this case, it's an insurance, so they have made contracts 30 years back or 10 years back, and they cannot change. They cannot change it. And another one is we write code for a mainframe, and OWASP is not possible. So now you need to think, what is acceptable for you as an excuse and what not? The 32-bit application, I would say, could be acceptable. but they have to put an isolation layer around it, and that can be patched actually. And the first one we saw here, we cannot open pull requests, we use SVN, yeah. I wouldn't consider that. They can switch to a modern architecture. The question is, how do you transport this knowledge? So when something is really not applicable, one option is to mark it as a gray box. You see that here. So you say, hey, this doesn't apply to that team. That will be more difficult when you have multiple teams, at least to, when you use the DSOMM application, it will be difficult. So that's in DSOMM currently not an option. For that, you will have to mark it as implemented. So maybe you put a comment why it is implemented, because it's an exception. Yeah, and another one is in case you use scorecards, that you put the number to 0. So in scorecards, you can say, hey, for this thing, I want 10. If you want to give out 10 points, and then you say, okay, the maximum here is 0, but that's also very difficult. Yeah, now we come to the implementation and measurement of improvements. How do you communicate your plan? Now you have the plan. How do you communicate it to the teams, to the different teams? So you could use a wiki, but my experience is you will create a table, and then you will reference the descriptions, and these links will get messed up, especially when you swap around the levels. So I always recommend to use a DSOMM application, or there are also other applications. I heard that Semi is also importing DSOMM currently. So there are different ways to do that. I wouldn't, as I said, do it manually or on Excel sheets, but that's up to you. And then you should communicate also the assessment criteria. So when will this activity get green? In the best case, you can quantify it. So an example is you measure the number of vulnerabilities which are currently open, and you say, okay, vulnerabilities of severity high or critical are allowed to be open for maximum 7 days. Afterwards, you will get, in case there is one in your application, it will get marked as not implemented and will show up red, or in DSOMM it will show up white. As we said already, I have to take a bit of a look at the time to give you the options to ask questions. Here you see some examples for the culture and organization dimension, what you could measure to see if teams are interested in security. I talk too much today. Here you see an example which is called Metrica, where you automatically gather from different sources information. For example, from Confluence, you can gather documentation of a threat modeling, when did it happen, and then you measure the frequency per application automatically. So no one needs to fill out a questionnaire. It's just gathered automatically. Same for Defect Dojo, for vulnerability metrics, or GitHub API. You can also ask, hey, are branch protections enabled in every repository? So you don't need to do everything manually. In the best case, you automate it. Here are some samples for Analyzer. This is a metric collector and analyzer where you see threat modeling and the compliance. Are you currently compliant? Have you performed threat modeling or not? So here, for example, you see this team performs threat modeling, so it goes up, and then it's valid for a specific amount of time, and then it drops again when they didn't happen as threat modeling again. That's how I like to visualize it. Let me come to the summary. So we need to give fast feedbacks. In the best case, you automate your assessments. We need planning of activities and a good way to communicate our plan to the teams. We should involve the teams a bit, not too much, a bit. And we need to execute it in the end. Thank you.